We are officially 2 weeks, 1 day away from the NFL draft. Teams working to fill their needs as we get closer, including, of course, the Arizona Cardinals signing running back James Conner to a one-year, $1.75 million deal. Arizona was in need of another running back after letting go Kenyon Drake in free agency. So James Conner, now 25 years old, spent the past 4 seasons with the Steelers. Went to the Pro Bowl back in 2018. All right, welcome in. I'm Amanda Guerra. That is Brady Quinn. We are also joined by our good friend Pete Prisco. So from now until the draft, we're going inside each team's war room. Today, of course, it is the Cardinals. So let's start with James Conner. Brady, what does their backfield now look like with him and Chase Edmonds?
No, I think they've got enough in the backfield where they might want to add a late, mid-round late pick in this running back class because there is some value there, I think, in this group. And as Pete was going to tell you here in about a few seconds, you can find running backs everywhere. But still, that being said, I don't necessarily know that it changes things dramatically for them. I think when you look at this offseason, what they did, bringing in veterans like A.J. Green, J.J. Watt, Malcolm Butler at the cornerback spot, those were their big splash moves. Rodney Hudson at the center spot to really solidify some of that offensive line up front. So those were the bigger moves. This is just kind of icing on the cake, if you will, as they head into a draft where, look, I think they're positioning themselves to try to make a run, Pete, in a really tough NFC West.
Yeah, it's almost like they pushed all their chips into the middle and they're going for it. And that's what it looks like to me. You bring in veterans like A.J. Green and J.J. Watt, you're pretty much telling everybody, look, this is our chance to go make a run. And I think they have an opportunity to do that. It puts a lot of pressure on Kyler Murray. It puts a lot of pressure on Cliff Kingsbury. Those guys got to be really good and on top of their games and on top of their game plans this year. You remember, people question Cliff Kingsbury's hire, and he's done a good job, but he's got to get this team into the postseason. I think signing Conner is a good move, but it doesn't take them out of the running back market. You mentioned it, Brady. Second, third, fourth round, they need to find another back to go with those two that they have.
All right, so Brady touched on this briefly. The Cardinals did make a decent amount of moves in free agency just prior to that, landing J.J. Watt, also in free agency, the likes of A.J. Green, Malcolm Butler. Pete, how successful would you say the Cardinals were in free agency?
Well, they got older. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but J.J. Watt coming to the end of his career. We know A.J. Green is coming to the end of his career, which is why I think these are moves made to win now. And, Steve Keim's had a couple of coaches. He has to win now, the general manager. I think Cliff Kingsbury, there's some pressure on him to get to the postseason. And when you look around the division, there's a lot of questions around those teams. I mean, who's going to be the quarterback of the 49ers? They don't know. Who's going to be the quarterback in Seattle for the long term? Is it Russell Wilson? They've had some attrition there as well on the defensive side of the ball. So I think if you add it all up, there's a new quarterback with the Rams. This is a year for Arizona to go make a push to go to the postseason. I get it. But sometimes these moves backfire because they are older players.
Urgency. I mean, that's what you feel from the Arizona Cardinals, from Steve Keim, from Cliff Kingsbury, all parties involved. I mean, you look at the signings, that's what it's signaling. I mean, they're believing that A.J. Green's going to be the player he was a few years ago, not what we've seen of late. J.J. Watt's going to be able to replicate what he did last year, even though that wasn't the case if you go back 3 years from that point in time. So it's a sense of urgency to try to win now, put a bunch of talented players that are veterans along with this young group that they've got on this roster already and see if they can make a run in a really tough NFC West division. So now it really comes down to the draft and how successful they will be at trying to put together the right chemistry, the right group moving forward.
Okay, both of you mentioned making a push for the postseason here, and yes, a very tough division because even with those moves already, according to our partners at William Hill, the Cardinals still the longest shot to win their division at plus 550. So let's talk about the draft 2 weeks from tomorrow night. Brady, what are some of their biggest needs?
Well, look, for me, it's cornerback. I mean, bottom line is I know they signed Malcolm Butler in the offseason. Yes, he's had a magical moment in the Super Bowl that won it for the New England Patriots back when he was a New England Patriot, but he's not the same player that he was back then. So they still need a cornerback, a lockdown cornerback, one in which that can replace what they lost in Patrick Peterson, who really wasn't even playing up to his own standards that I think he set for himself But after that, I think you could look at the interior of the defensive line. I think safety is still another position that you could utilize because so many of these teams now play so many nickel and dime packages. You got a lot of defensive backs out there in the field. So cornerback to me, though, is their #1 need. And this is a great draft with where they're at in the first round to get one of the big three, as they call them, between J.C. Horn, Caleb Fairley, and obviously Patrick Surtain, who I don't think is going to be there by the time they pick.
Yeah, corner. I think that's their #1 need. And you look at their corner group, Malcolm Butler getting up in the years, another older player or an aging player. I think Byron Murphy, they have to hope that he can take a leap this year. And so they need another good young cornerback. And I think that's where they'll probably target. That's the position they'll target in the first round if they can. They also need help at linebacker. And they brought back Marcus Golden. And I know he's a good, solid player, but I don't think he's their future. So maybe a guy like Zaven Collins. And that might sound crazy, but a lot of teams look at him as a guy who can go outside and rush the passer as a 3-4 linebacker. So that could be a possibility. I agree with you that they need some help on the down players in the interior, but they did draft a couple guys last year, Lawrence and another guy that they hope that can step in there and be guys that can be productive. But corner is definitely the biggest need for this team.
All right, corner. We get it for both of you there. So as of now, the Cardinals hold the 16th overall pick. Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft not going with a corner, rather on offensive lineman Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC. Pete, I think yesterday you said that was a pretty good pick for them, but let's specifically talk names. Brady said he doesn't think Patrick Surtain will be there. I don't know if you like Patrick Surtain at that pick, if you think he'll be there. What are some names you're looking at 16?
Yeah, I don't think Patrick Surtain will be there either. I think this is going to be one of those scenarios where they hope a guy like J.C. Horn maybe falls to them. And he's a good corner. I really do. Maybe Asante Samuel. I think there's a lot of people in this draft market that are undervaluing Asante Samuel. But J.C. Horn is definitely one. Caleb Farley, he had the back issues. Some people thought he might be the top corner in the class. It might drop him down a little bit. Zaven Collins, I mentioned him. And Brady mentioned safety. Trevon Moehrig is another guy. I think that's a possibility. Can you imagine pairing him with Buda Baker on the back end of that defense? That would be a nice group as well. But Zaven Collins, keep an eye on that, because I hear they do like him, and he might be a possibility at that spot.
Well, how could you not like him? I mean, look, he's versatile. He could do a bunch of different things. He really was the key cog within the Tulsa defense last year. So there's a lot to like about Zaven Collins' game. And I think every defense right now is trying to find chess pieces, because that's what the offenses are presenting them, with running backs and tight ends that are tough matchups for their defenses. So now they're trying to do the same with a guy like Isaiah Simmons, who they took last year in the first round. Is he a DB? Is he a linebacker? Does he end up playing a hybrid of both? Most likely. Zaven Collins kind of falls in that category as an inside, off-the-ball linebacker, but he can rush from the outside. You can move him around, do a bunch of different things. For me, I feel like if Surtain's not there, and if there is a run on these cornerbacks, and I do think there will be, I don't even know if J.C. Horn will be there or if Caleb Farley will be there either. So, a guy like Tyson Campbell out of Georgia, he's got the length at 6'2", and I think he's got the pedigree as well. When looking at the Georgia cornerbacks, now they've translated to the NFL with their style of play. He would be a guy that I would look at. I don't think it's a reach. And the only reason I say him over Asante Samuel Jr. is because they've already got a similar player there in Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy is much similar in size and skill set that traditionally can play that nickel role that you're looking for as your third cornerback in the game. They, to me, need a lockdown cornerback on the outside that's going to be able to play on an island. Tyson Campbell is that player if the other big three are gone.
Okay, sorry, I thought I heard a little noise there. Both you mentioned Zaven Collins there. By the way, if you guys want to check out CBSSports.com, our 4 mock drafts from our experts there would be available at 16 if that goes down. All right, let's talk about day 2. Both of you will be here working very hard on day 2 of the NFL draft. Let's talk about names they could target. Then, Brady, we'll start with you.
One of my favorite players in this draft is Pat Freiermuth at the tight end position. He's the next guy after Kyle Pitts. And by the way, there's a big kind of drop off just in looking at what Pitts presents and then kind of every tight end. But Freiermuth is the next guy. He's more of your traditional tight end. He can put his hand in the dirt and run block, pass protect, but he's athletic enough to impact the game down the field. Here's the problem. The Cardinals don't really use their tight ends that much. Now, they did a little bit more last year, and so maybe this is the right fit. It's going to have to be the second round because I don't think he's going to be there in the third or the subsequent rounds. And if it's not Freiermuth, to me, Go find out more offensive firepower. Go get some wide receivers, guys like Elijah Moore, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Terrace Marshall. Those would be nice pairings to what they already have on this roster, and they just need as much firepower as they can have within that division.
Yeah, I'm staying on the other side of the ball. I'm going with the defensive players. If they don't get a corner in the first round, then maybe Kelvin Joseph out of Kentucky or Asante Samuel if he fell down to him. Eric Stokes is another quarterback. You mentioned Campbell. I've talked to a lot of people who think Stokes is the better player. I tend to agree with them. Jamar Johnson is a safety I love out of Indiana. I think if you paired him with Budda Baker, give you a nice back end for them as well. And then Elijah Molden, another cornerback whose father played in the NFL as well. So I think corner, if they don't get one in the first round, and maybe even if you get one in the first round, you might come back and get the safety in the second round to solidify the secondary.
You know, Pete's got to feel old with all these players whose fathers that he watched play in the NFL at some point. I mean, Asante Samuel Jr., he mentioned Elijah Molden, he mentioned there's a number of these players in the draft. They got to be making Pete feel old.
See, I was going to say even...
Brady, you played with those guys. Sorry.
Hey,
you played with those guys.
I don't feel old, though. I mean, I'm saying you've got to be feeling old when that's the case.
Even with the age difference, at least both of you have style with your matching shirts on today. All right, you guys hang on just a second. We're going to come back with much more. Really quick, taking a look at the Cardinals odds here to win the Super Bowl. Well, that is a mighty tall task there, 40-1 odds. And I mentioned even to win their division, they are the fourth favorite at plus 550. All right, coming up, Justin Herbert after his breakout rookie season. What can we expect for the Chargers, and how can they get him some help? We'll go into the Chargers war room next. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.